After colonialism, a new strand visited Africa called neocolonialism. Europeans will never stop coming to Africa until and unless they see Africa being grazed to ground. The direct political rule of a country without the use of open military force, it is called neocolonialism. After 1884-1885 Berlin Conference, Africa was divided into 54 countries. Then came the European powers. They introduced the system of administrations. British, French, the German, the Dutch, the Portuguese, the Belgians. All of them had territories that they occupy here in Africa. When European powers will want to graze Africa to brown, from green to brown, neocolonialism. When they were driven by our nationalists, by our founding fathers, and yet they will sit at a farm and be monitoring Africa, be having their say in the affairs of African people. That is called neocolonialism. European powers controlling the economy of African countries. That is neocolonialism now. When the African people or the European powers, they sat at Berlin, Germany, they brought the map of Africa out with their coffees and alcohol, drinking and laughing, divided the map of Africa into 54 odd countries, and Africa had never been the same again. When Lumumba stood up on his feet and said no to colonialism, no to neocolonialism, he was executed. He was gone on his head and he died. Lumumba of Congo. In 2011, Gaddafi was killed. Neocolonialism. They will never stop coming to Africa unless they see Africa now turning from green to brown. When the European powers are pumping money in Africa, building our roads, our schools, our stadiums, and in turn, they will impose their policy here in Africa. And our African head of state will succumb to their ideas, neocolonialism. When African people are learning European languages as their official language, neocolonialism. When the African people practicing a political system that was introduced or that their colonial masters are practicing, that is called neocolonialism. They control the economy of our country without the use of any open military force. They will dictate African people on what to do, what to say and what to eat, even what to eat now. African, European have to decide. Our lands are lying fallow. Lands are lying idle. No farming from African countries. We are no longer growing what we are eating now. Instead, we are eating what we are not growing. Neocolonialism. The European will determine or dictate the African people even what to say, what to land, and even what to wear. That is why the reserve banks of some of the African people are in France. Some of the African people or African countries, they are paying tax to France, their colonial masters, and that should not be neocolonialism. Until and unless we liberate our minds, we free our minds from Western mentality, we will not move as African people. That is why many African countries, their stadium, their infrastructures were built, if not the Chinese, then the European themselves. How many African countries are having ships employing their youth now to extracting their resources such as fish? How many? The Chinese now are coming. In our lifetime, I'm seeing the Chinese coming because I've never seen the European coming because I was not born at the time. That's why now in our universities we are learning Chinese language called Mandarin. Neocolonialism. When they want to colonize or control the African people, first what they will do, they will control our educational sector. And I believe in 25 years' time, Africa is going to be recolonized again. In China at the time, there was one-child policy, but now, two-child or three-child policy now. Most of our stadiums were not built by the African people, but they were built by the Europeans, and in return or in turn, they will dictate on what to do. Whenever they give you money, you cannot pay. They ask you to do things that they want you to do, and you must do it, you must succumb. Those who refuse, those African or few Africans who have the consent to refuse, neocolonialisms were liquidated. That's why some of them, they died. We have lost the initiative as Africans. You go to Ghana, they produce cocoa, but they don't produce chocolate. The chocolate is being produced in Switzerland. You come to Gambia, even the little granite we are producing is not recognized in world market. The coffee that we are producing here, the raw material is here in Africa. But now, even the tea is all in Africa. But they call it as English tea. Neocolonialism. What are the features or the elements of neocolonialism? What are the features of neocolonialism now? When the European will stand at a far and having a say in African matters, observing our election, directing and dictating what our African leaders should do, controlling our most or our highest institutions with the name of AIDS, grant. When Africans will go and beg the Europeans, even when they want to make laws, they will go and seek advice from the Europeans. Neocolonialism. One of the features of neocolonialism is the use of European language as our official language. It's neocolonialism now. People who colonized you, they took your ancestors, they took your natural resources, and now you use their language as official language. In Senegal, they speak French as their official language. Even when their people are debating in the House of Representatives, they speak foreign language. Come to Gambia, even our representatives, they speak foreign language in the National Assembly. Colonialism. Even the electorate cannot be able to speak foreign language, but our parliamentarians will be speaking foreign language. The electorate are just watching, but they are not knowing what type of laws are they making. That is colonialism, neocolonialism. When African countries succumb to European language as their official language, is a feature of neocolonialism. Second, when our transport system, our communication network, such as this airplane, these road networks now, are all in favor of the Europeans, neocolonialism. Because most of these aeroplanes that are in African countries are made by the Europeans, and still they will control to do what they want. That is neocolonialism. When African leaders or African countries use a political system that are being practiced by the West, neocolonialism. When they are practicing democracy, here too in Africa, democracy. That is why when Kwame Nkrumah was using communism to rule the people, or socialism, they described him as a dictator, and they decided to eliminate him. That was coup d'etat. He went at a far, and look at Ghana, the country that he struggled for years, Kwame Nkrumah. When African countries, most of their sectors are owned and controlled by foreign powers, it's a feature of neocolonialism. Our roads are built, our stadiums are built. Our public sectors, even our state house, are built by the European powers. That is neocolonialism. A person who feeds you, controls you, dictates you, assigns you to do what he or she wishes. That's why most of our African presidents have been controlled, remote controlled by the European powers. That is neocolonialism. Few Africans who resisted against or who are saying no, who said no to neocolonialism include Modibo Keita of Mali and Tafawa Balewa, Leopold Sedar Senghor, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia. These were all African people who resisted against colonialism. They were Africans by blood and Africans by birth. How neocolonialism leads to the underdevelopment of Africa? Because of neocolonialism, most of the African countries are underdeveloped. For instance, the European Economic Community. The Europeans, they favor themselves. They are trading among themselves and they are determining how to trade with the African people. They will set the price of goods and service for the African people. They determine how much are they going to buy our farm products. Even the farmers here in Africa have no say on the price in which they are going to sell their products in terms of export, such as the cash crops. So as a result, Africa going to live in absolute poverty, African farmers. And the International Monetary Fund, they will give money, loans and grants to African leaders and African countries. And in return, they will demand something from African people, very precious. And what they are demanding is even more than what they give us as loan. And African people continue to live in absolute poverty. That is neocolonialism and effect. Third, it leads to low level of infrastructural development, low level of bridges now, roads, parks. Most of them are not built in Africa. Why? Because neocolonialism now. They will determine the type of developments that we are going to do in our own country. That is a feature, that is an effect of neocolonialism. That is an effect of neocolonialism now. When the West, the Europeans, the French, the British determine what Africans are going to do in terms of development, what Africans are going to learn in their institutions, what Africans are going to eat, what Africans are going to grow, that is neocolonialism. Africa is never at ease. And what will happen if Kwame Nkrumah is to rise up from his grave and look at the Africa that has struggled for years now? What will happen if Modibo Keita were to rise up from his grave and look at the Africa that he struggled for years? When they think of killing Gaddafi, it's going to bring ease in Libya. Let them go and look at Libya, what is happening in there right now. When they realize that a leader is trying hard to develop a particular country in Africa, that leader is being liquidated. Steve Biko was not a president, but was a panda, was a nationalist. He was killed in cold blood by the Europeans. We will never forget this. Amilcar Cabral, of course, was among those African people who were executed because he was gone by one of his fellow under the influence of the European powers. And what will happen if Lumumba were to rise up from his grave and look at the Africa that he struggled for? Then it was scramble and partition. colonialism now is neocolonialism. Neocolonialism. Dangerous in our lifetime. What are the problems or the negative effects of neocolonialism? One, it leads to slow development, slow pace of development of Africa. Because when someone is dictating and directing you what type of development you are going to do, of course the developmental project will be slow. It's an effect. It leads to the slow pace of developments in Africa because of neocolonialism now. And two, low level of standards of living of the African people. Our standards of living is drastically low. Why? Because the price of goods and service is increasing, it is skyrocketing. Gone are those days when the living condition of the African people was very high. Because the price of goods and service were not that much skyrocketing. But now the Europeans are even determining what we are going to eat as African, what we are going to grow as African. Of course, our standards of living will drastically reduce. It's an effect. And three, most of our sectors are owned by the European powers. Most of our sectors now in Africa, when you look at them, our big sectors that could have produced huge or generated huge amount of income for the African people are owned by the European powers. It's an effect of neocolonialism in our lifetime. Until we free ourselves from neocolonialism as African people, we will never move an inch. Very bad to a country and dangerous to our society. So neocolonialism, of course, leads to what they call low level of economic development. Because they'll give us money if we cannot pay. They will dictate us, they will tell us to do this. Any source of income that African countries are generating, they are being paid as tax to the colonial government or to the European powers or imperialists. So this is neocolonialism in our lifetime, and this is Historic TV. Subscribe, and you can also help through a platform called Buy Me Coffee for this channel to continue to thrive in our lifetime. This is Historic TV at this point, of course. Mr. San.